Why didn't I flinch? Because the laws of science differ fundamentally from those of...
Have you ever wondered why we have heard about a force called gravity our entire lives, and yet nobody has ever been able to prove that it exists, even though untold numbers of experiments have been performed seeking its cause? Academics have proposed many strange solutions to their mythical gravity by inventing many theories about gravitational attraction: inward pulling gravity, gravitons, gravity waves, 4D warped space and time, to name just a few. It is even claimed that gravity has a velocity, though nobody can explain what is traveling to create this invented force. Scientists do not even know how their mythical force operates, whether it is graviton particles, gravity waves, a strange, unexplainable force which acts at a distance through empty space, or a four-dimensional warped space and time delusion. We have all heard about this inward pulling force called gravity from the academic scientists, and its warped cousin conjured up by Einstein, yet no one has ever discovered the power source for its never-ending pulling force, or its ability to warp space and time perpetually throughout eternity. This theory violates the conservation of energy law, so it cannot be validated using the very foundational formulas, laws, or equations cherished by academics themselves, and requires a kind of religious faith in its existence, since it cannot be seen, proved, nor validated. Have you ever heard that astronomers believe that gravity knows, as if it has consciousness, just how much force to dole out to the various heavenly bodies according to how much mass they have? Newton added the product of two masses to Kepler's third equation without justification, which has created all of this confusion, since mass is not the cause of the effects attributed to the myth called gravity. For example, academics believe that the Sun pulls on Jupiter 300 times harder than the Earth, because these astronomers believe that Jupiter has 300 times more mass than Earth. Academic astronomers claim that the Sun pulls on all heavenly bodies in our solar system with a different amount of force according to how much mass they have. How this could happen is never explained, nor is it remotely tenable. Anyone with common sense can see this is absurd, and would reject this proposition if they knew what these so-called astronomers actually believe, and have faith in as their science of gravity. Patti Spolter proved in her work that the product of two masses which Newton added to Kepler's third equation is fallacious, and that Kepler's third equation, area times acceleration, is the math that accurately describes the motions of heavenly bodies. This means that Newton's so-called universal law of gravitation, based on the product of two masses, is in fact false. Newton's formula for universal gravitation gives sums which are off by many orders of magnitude when comparing the various motions of the heavenly bodies within our solar system, unlike the uniform results created using Kepler's third equation of area times acceleration. It is claimed by academia that gravity is responsible for the formation of the Big Bang universe, which, as anyone with discernment knows, is an impossibility as well, and that without gravity, the universe would be without thermal energy and composed only of equally spaced particles. The answer has been staring academics in the face for several generations now. Electric laws were unknown to Newton in his time. However, now we know with great accuracy the effects of electricity as obeying the inverse square law. The fact is that so-called magnetism, which in reality is electricism, light, sound, and radiation are all electric motions. All motion in the universe is electric. This is why the myth called gravity conforms to the inverse square law, since it is electric force which creates the effects falsely attributed to the fictitious force called gravity. Electric force in all forms, scales, and pressures, from the elements to the galaxies, obey this foundational, inverse square law. Electricity is the only force in the universe. It will be shown that the force called gravity, which was created by Newton and later modified by Einstein and others, does not exist and is purely mythical in its creation. The consequences of this conclusion are immense. It means that a huge list of non-existent entities have been invented by academic scientists based on the mathematics of the non-existent force of gravity. For example, here are a few of the many academic science myths created from their foundational myth called gravity. Dark matter, dark energy, black holes, singularities, event horizons, WIMPs, MOND, machos, neutron stars, gravitational collapse, gravitons, gravity waves, quantum gravity, inward pulling gravity, gravitational lensing, the gravitational constant, the Schwarzschild radius, gravitational radiation, frame dragging, general relativity, anti-gravity, virtual gravitons, and quantum field theory, which are in fact false as well. With the fall of academic gravity theory, all of these other fallacious theories fall with it. No experiments are required to prove my assertions, since we have volumes of data from experiments already cataloged, which only need to be converted to the understanding that the electric force is the cause of everything in our electric universe, and not a mythical and magical gravitational force that acts at a distance.
Now if you do some searches, you will find, if you look for Thomas Townsend Brown on YouTube, you will actually find some laboratory videos, and these experiments were done a long time ago, experiments into electrogravity, and people have tried to say that these effects were nothing to do with actual electromagnetic effects on gravity, but that these were purely ion wind. That is to say, the air is moved from one terminal to the other, creating lift or creating propulsion. Now, as part of these experiments, you will notice the use of a vacuum chamber. There it is. And when these experiments were done, obviously a paper was actually published, and it was immediately classified. And these studies have been done time and time again by various different people. Every time they're done, the papers are classified, and the results just simply disappear from the mainstream science record.
Brown entered the California Institute of Technology in 1922 and began establishing himself as a first-class lab man. His goal was to win over his professors so he could show them the results of his experiments and hopefully get them interested in the electrogravitic phenomenon. He had some of his equipment from his laboratory in Ohio shipped out to California, hoping to demonstrate the effects to his professors. He sent each of his professors invitations, invited them to come witness his experiment. Unfortunately, none of them showed up. Brown would later leave Caltech heartbroken and attend college back in Ohio at Denison University. In 1928, Brown published a paper on the Biefeld-Brown effect using the name of one of his professors, Dr. Alfred Biefeld. It is uncertain whether Dr. Biefeld had any actual influence on the experiments or on the production of the paper itself. These reported effects have been excused, ignored, and even ridiculed by mainstream science. According to Wikipedia, the Biefeld-Brown effect is a result of ion wind and not a gravitational effect. To support this statement, they cite vacuum chamber experiments carried out by the Mythbusters television show and another conducted by Dr. Martin Tajmar. They, however, fail to make any mention of conflicting experimental results. In 1955 and 1956, under the sponsorship of the French government, Thomas Townsend Brown conducted a series of vacuum chamber experiments at facilities made available by Société Nationale de Constructions Aéronautiques du Sud-Ouest, a Paris-based aeronautical corporation. There, Brown flew a pair of miniature saucer-shaped airfoils in a high vacuum of less than 1/billionth of an atmosphere. According to alleged witness reports, not only did the discs propel themselves more efficiently inside of a vacuum, but they also sped faster since without ion leakage they could be energized with greater voltages. So despite what the science police who monitor Wikipedia have to say, the verdict on the Biefeld-Brown effect is not quite so cut and dry. Without further experimentation and analysis, it is impossible to tell whether this is an elaborate hoax on the part of Thomas Townsend Brown or a scientific cover-up of the electrogravitic technology. One thing is for certain, the government and military seem to be hiding something. In its March 9, 1992 issue of Aviation Week and Space Technology magazine, they made the surprising disclosure that the B-2 advanced technology bomber electrostatically charges its exhaust stream and the leading edges of its wing-like body. Although these disclosures were framed in the context of enhancing the B-2's radar and visibility, it is believed that they are in fact part of an electrogravitic drive capability. Aviation Week obtained this information from a small group of renegade West Coast scientists and engineers who were formerly associated with Black Research Projects, which are defense research projects that are so secret that even their very existence is classified. Northrop, the prime contractor for the B-2, had been experimenting with applying high-voltage charge to aircraft hulls since at least 1968, when at an aerospace sciences meeting held in New York in January of 1968, scientists from Northrop's NORAIR division reported that they were beginning wind tunnel studies on aerodynamic effects of applying high-voltage charges to the leading edges of high-speed aircraft bodies. Similar research was carried out in 1965 by the Grumman and Avco corporations. Interestingly, in 1994, Northrop bought out and merged with Grumman. Brown also called attention to this effect in his 1960 electrokinetic apparatus patent, which describes using a flame jet generator to place a high-voltage positive charge on a needle-like electrode at the front end of a rocket. Aerospace companies later put Brown's suggestions into use. A spike was placed on the nose of a rocket and caused to emit a high-voltage arc. Wind tunnel studies showed that the resulting electric field pushed the bow shock front away from the nose of the rocket so that it no longer contacted the main body of the missile, and hence substantially reduced the air drag. Now, there's a big difference between using high-voltage electrostatics to reduce air drag versus producing gravitational effects. If the presence of extremely large electric fields can affect local gravity, it could be the breakthrough that scientists and gravity researchers have been waiting for, or maybe they've just been ignoring it all along. Either way, the information I have just provided you with should be enough to warrant a further investigation. According to Dr. Eugene Podkletnov, high-voltage electrostatic fields produce a polarization of the vacuum energy density, or a polarization of the subatomic particles which constitute the vacuum, and thereby produce gravitational effects. There is also apparently more than one way to achieve this.
Magnets go a lot further, or electromagnetic or electrostatic force goes way further in explaining this idea of gravity than anything else, and it's not even that it has anything to do with gravity as we're taught it. Basically, the buoyancy and density argument works very well, but like I've said many times before, there is still something that determines up from down, and as I believe and many other physicists believe, not the least of which would be Wal Thornhill of the Thunderbolts project. That it is a static dipole effect that is essentially that potential of up from down is set by the natural electrostatic charge of the Earth plane itself. And, commensurate with that, if the Earth is indeed some sort of an electric circuit, then the anode, the cathode would be the Earth. And we know that the Earth has this static field, even by mainstream physics, that is measured at 100 volts per meter, going up to at least 50 kilometers, right? Which gives us a minimum static potential, or average, of 5 million volts.
Much of the following explanation is adapted from Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman's lecture on physics, a section called Electricity in the Atmosphere. For every meter you go up in the air, the voltage increases by around 100 volts, or we could say around 100 volts per yard. We can draw these voltage increases using what are called equipotential lines. Notice that the ground is negative and the sky is positive with respect to each other. According to Feynman, this extends upward to 50 kilometers, or 31 miles, where the air is very conductive.
It goes up 50 kilometers, according to Richard Feynman, or 31 miles. And at 100 volts per meter, that leaves us with a static potential in the air between the Earth ground and 31 miles up of 5 million volts. Okay, that's not that's not a small figure. Believe me, 5 million volts is a lot of energy, a lot of voltage. Now, the thing about this static electricity